Hi everyone, this is Alexander Zeitlin with the Lockdown Lecture Series for Intermediate Cello, adapted from the Foundations course from Alias Music for the classroom setting. Let's jump into Lesson 6. So last time we take a look at this sixth movement, and we were working with the rhythms reverse drilling technique to kind of help increase your finger speed and be able to handle higher velocity pieces like this. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to just play through it and with me and just kind of get a feel for it at a slightly faster speed, about this speed. And we're going to do 8 on a bow. So jump in with me. You can follow along, and we'll do the reverse rhythm right after. So here it is from the beginning. We're going to do the whole thing except for the last 2 chords. Skip the last 2 chords, and now let's try the reverse rhythm from the beginning. So that is our 8 on a bow rhythms in reverse. And at this point, if you can keep up with that, that means your left hand's probably looking pretty strong. Apologies for the couple notes. I have a left hand injury, actually. So I missed a couple. But so at this point, your left hand's looking pretty strong. It's time to start working in the even tempo, but at a higher tempo. And so we're going to come back to metronome work now. And so I'm going to pull up my metronome, and now is the time when we start doing a metronome workup. Now, before we were looking at this at quarter note equals 60, but now we're going to maybe jump into 80 because 60 is probably too slow, and that would sound like this. So here is 80. So once I've got 80 down, I can move up to 90. Here's 90. And here's, keep going and get to 100. So what you notice as I got from 80 to 90 to 100 is that the tempo didn't really seem that much faster. It was just like a little bit faster each time. And that's because, the metronome, I can use the metronome to create these small gradations in my tempo. And just as a human being, we're not very good at making tiny, minute changes. Computers are really good at that, so the metronome works really well. Most of the time when I ask a student to play something slightly faster, they literally double the tempo, and they think that's a little bit faster, and it sounds like controllably a little bit faster, but it's a lot faster. And if you change the tempo significantly, what ends up happening is, a lot of stress is introduced, and you're like, now I'm trying to keep up at this faster tempo. So I recommend working it up in increments of 10 beats per minute, and a good final tempo is 120. So let me demonstrate what that would be. Here's 120. And so on. Now, really, as an intermediate player, if you can handle quarter note equals 120 with 16-note passage work, you are in really strong shape with your left hand. Just a couple tips for working up with the metronome. When you're playing faster and faster, don't think of like, it's like, oh, I gotta actively play faster and keep up with the metronome. You're gonna start like pressing with your fingers and making big motions, and that's just gonna actually make you slow down. So think playing lighter and softer. Your good way to trick your left hand into just relaxing and playing lighter is to just play softer with your right hand. You can add this sound back in later. So instead of playing to start with, just as light and soft as you can, it's going to help you hit those faster tempos as quickly as possible. But then also what you can do is, as you're working things up, you'll get to that point where you feel like, I can't go any faster than this. I made it. I survived at 100. I know I won't make it at 110. But if you made it at 100, at least try 110 a couple times. You might fail all three times in a row. And if you fail a tempo like 3 times in a row, that's probably enough for that day. Try again the next day to get faster. But if you tried it at that tempo, you will have a higher chance of success the next day. So your homework for this movement is to alternate now. 1 day drilling rhythms reverse, 1 day metronome work. And you should be reviewing your first 2 movements. So moving on to the 7th movement. Your other half of the homework is going to be to learn this. Just to kind of introduce you to the movement, it looks similar to the previous movement, except you see no slurs, which seems like, oh, no big deal, no slurs, except that means that your right hand is moving fast and your left hand is moving fast. Now, your left hand moving fast all in its own is fine. Your right hand moving fast on its own is fine, but if they have to do it together, is quite difficult. So we will be looking at some special drilling techniques to help your right and left hand stay coordinated next time. But this time it's just learning notes. So that's section A1. A1 is straightforward. It's all in first position. You should be able to learn it without a problem. There's just that one harmonic shift at the end. So the A2 section, this piece is special for cello. For the violinists and violists, it's really not that big a deal. But I've had professors of universities look at this piece and think like, this is a brilliant way to teach more efficient small position shifting. The problem is, for the A2 section, my first 4 notes, and then I have to go down to E flat. I go down like 2 half steps. I have to go up another step and another. So in 4 notes, I've shifted basically 4 times. And that's a problem because at that fast tempo, that's not going to happen. Now, I said I'm not going to get much into shifting in this lecture series, but just for you cellos, I will describe this technical process. Some of you may find that it's actually more difficult for the left hand than for the right hand, this piece. But try and learn something from it anyway, and I think eventually you'll come back to it and find that this is a brilliant way to learn this positional technique. So if I instead play my first note, then shift my hand down only a half step and extension to here, and I only have 1 more shift. Now I only have 2 shifts instead of 4. Just a small half step, extension. Being able to cut this down to 2 shifts is actually still quite difficult, but it's completely playable. Now, some of you who are used to playing kind of in one position for a while and then another might find this like extremely difficult, and it is. Don't worry, as you progress as cellists, there will be much more difficult, like positional shifting things that you will have to deal with. This is just the beginning. Welcome to being a cellist. But if you guys want to see that again, here it is again. Instead of shift, 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 half step. What I do instead is prepare an extension position, shift down only a half step, and then just have one more shift to the third finger. So that would be the proper way to do this. And this section has one more very special thing, this little shift right here. So since there's a shift mark, we actually play this note up on the D string. So we don't play the E flat. So like your first quarter note there is A flat. We don't play E flat on the A string, we play it way up here. And it comes pretty quick. Right? So we have a challenging shift, and we're going to take a look at how to practice challenging shifts. So in practice challenging shifts, let's take a look at a new drilling technique. So essentially the problem with shifts is, I know how to play one note. I know how to play a high note. The problem is getting to them, right? What happens in between the notes. But most of the time, if they're separate bows especially, the shift happens in the bow change. I play a bow, and then in that moment that I change the bow and there's no sound being made, it's when I do the shift and then I do the next bow. So what I want to do is I want to be able to hear what goes on in between. So I'm going to double every note here, and then I am going to just slur them. So now the shift happens in the middle of the bow. It sounds like this. Instead of this, I have this. Twice the bottom, twice the top, and slurred. Right, so now I heard it. I heard exactly how I was shifting, and I can hear, do I shift in a jerky way? Am I under shifting? Right, so I can slow it down to make sure I get the shift exactly right. So this is what we call the repeat connect drilling method, and we particularly use it for shifts. I can use it for, any series of notes that has shifts. Something like just double every note, repeat connect. And I've heard my shifts, and I can kind of see what's going on with my shifts. Now, what we're going to do for this particular shift is we are going to do exactly that on these two notes. We're just going to do it back and forth. I just realized I've been showing everything in the smaller frame. Here it is in full size. So here's what the repeat connect looks like full size. And then we're going to work on these two notes here. So we're going to, anyway, like I was saying, we're going to do repeat connect. We're just going to do it not just forwards, but backwards also. It sounds like this. All right, so I can go back and forth, and as I get better at the shift, I can speed it up. Right, and then I'm going to know the shift pretty well. As I approach it, it should be less difficult. Now I know what that shift feels like. So that's how to practice difficult shifts. The A3 section is not particularly challenging. It has the exact same finger position issue. So you're going to be using that. Another harmonic. Here's the A4 section. Also has that exact same finger position issue. So you're going to be using the extension with the shift approach to it. And then you have this note, which I don't know if you guys have seen this before. Normally we play this harmonic on the D string, like in the middle of the fingerboard. It's what's known as our first partial or our quarter or our half partial. To play it an octave higher, we would place we basically play a harmonic exactly where we would play like D4, and we draw like a triangle or a diamond note head here, or where D4 would be. And so like basically if I had this note here, D4, and I use the harmonic, I get that harmonic. So here's my original harmonic. Middle of the fingerboard, here it is at the quarter partial. I'm not going to go into like the physics lecture that was required to explain how this works. Maybe if I get enough requests, I will at some point. But that's how to play that note. But you notice we'll have two more of them in the next section right here. So this one is that quarter partial on the A string, and then this is the quarter partial on the D string. But that's part of the A5 section, and the rest of it should be straightforward. Your job is to learn the notes, rhythm and bowings, get some metronome work in at a slow tempo for this movement. At quarter note equals 50 is a good working tempo for this piece. And my recommendation is for that difficult finger positioning thing, for like a whole week, just never play it faster than you can do it well with that finger positioning thing. So if you start to go fast enough and you start doing the shifting every note thing, slow it back down again so that you can actually play only one shift, shift. And then that should help you make sure that if you do that every time as you do the speed workups, you will play it correctly. So that's your homework, and then to alternate drilling for the sixth movement and review your first two movements. That's it. I will see you guys at the next lecture.